right, so today I'm super thrilled to be chatting with Samra Habib about her brilliant new publication. Samra is Lahore born, and she moved to Toronto to live as she came into Canada as a refugee with her family in her teens. She's a writer, a creative collaborator, and photographer. Her work has been exhibited at the International Center of Photography in New York, Contact Photography Festival, the prestigious Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and SOMARTS in San Francisco. When she's not photographing, that's always a tricky word, queer Muslims around the world and sharing their stories, she works with various LGBTQIA organizations internationally to raise awareness about issues that impact queer Muslims in different parts of the world. Through her writing and her art, she aims to highlight the personal narratives and individual stories behind global crises and injustices. Her writing has appeared in media outlets like the New York Times, The Advocate, Public Radio International, Guardian, Vice, The Globe and Mail, Elle Canada, National Post, and Fashion Magazine. Folks, could we please give a really warm welcome to Samra Habib to the Ottawa International Writers Festival. Hey.
I don't know if you recall, but we just met today,
Yeah.
and the first thing I said to you, do you remember what that was?
You met my mom.
No, not that. I told you that you smelled amazing.
Yes. Yeah, you did.
It's just the way I connect with my surroundings,
Yeah.
the smell. And I think for me, a lot of it was just to really jog my memory and to recall memories I might have sort of buried really deeply, right? Because I just sort of felt like I needed to just keep moving. And in fact, I asked my father while I was writing the book, there were some things that I really sort of wanted to remember, have clarity around, and he wears this prayer oil, Juma. When he goes to Juma, he wears this prayer oil that he purchased from this sort of street stand in Lahore. And I asked him if I could, take it while I was writing the book. And, just sort of smelling that, I sort of had a lot of memories come back to me about what it was like getting ready for Juma prayer with my father, or getting ready for school with my father. And it's just sort of, I feel like scent is just what I am drawn to the most. That is sort of how I connect to everything around me, sort of brings me a sense of comfort.
Yeah.
Visual aspect specifically. For years I worked in fashion, so I was sort of really drawn to imagery, and I sort of understood the power of imagery and just photography in general. And, oftentimes I feel what I talked about in terms of intersectionality, it's not really, especially when it comes to queer Muslim identities, it's not a new concept.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of queer Muslims have been discussed and talked about forever. But I just sort of wanted to utilize a medium that I thought would be super accessible, that everyone could respond to, right? Because, not everyone necessarily has the language or the tools to really understand what happens within academic walls.
Yeah.
And I just felt that everyone has such an emotional response to photography and just visual imagery. So I sort of deployed whatever it was that I learned and picked up through fashion journalism, and I sort of deployed those tools to tell a story that sort of felt really personal to me, a story that I thought was sort of missing in sort of this mainstream narratives that I was seeing about different identities. And I thought, what is it that I could sort of use? What is my lived experience that I could use to sort of tell a story about the context that I live in?
Yeah. Well, we'll talk a little bit later about this, but I love the loaded and coded words that you have sort of built into this. So I'm all about lists. So I as I'm reading, I'm seeing the words seeing, not being seen, overlooked, policed, hiding, desiring to be seen. It's sort of you cannot leave the visual element out of it, but leading to that, I'm wondering if you would be wanting to read a particular section of the book that sort of follows you leaving the Unity Mosque, that sort of leads to you wanting to interject,
right?
In representations.
For sure.
Yeah.
And you have to remind me. One of the things I loved most about photography is how accessible it is as a language. Because English was not my first language, I often struggled to articulate subtle feelings I was used to talking about in Urdu, which is much more poetic language. As a kid, I found comfort in cheesy pop songs by the Spice Girls and the Backstreet Boys because I could grasp the simplicity of their lyrics. My inability to access the language in a deep and layered way prevented me from fully expressing the flood of emotions and frustrations I'd felt as an immigrant in a new country. Our understanding of the interior lives of those who are not like us is contingent on their ability to articulate themselves in the language we know. The further removed people are from proficiency in that language, the less likely they are to be understood as complex individuals. The audience often fills in the blanks with their own preconceptions. But visual language is more easily parsed and a much more democratic form of communication. We are bombarded with images through advertising, television, and social media. Consuming images is part of our daily life. Much has been written in academia about queer Muslims, but often the ideas and findings are disseminated by scholars who have far more privilege than the subjects of their work. I've sat on panels where I felt excluded from conversations by the barrier of academic jargon. It seemed as though meaningful dialogue was available only to those with a PhD. In this way, the language is inaccessible to those who need to be comforted most. Queer Muslims who fear for their lives every day while walking down the streets of Punjabi villages or meeting a potential love interest for the first time in Tehran through a dating app might not have the tools to understand the language written by academics in Ivy League schools. Representation is critical. Representation is a critical way for people to recognize that their experiences, even if invisible in the mainstream, are valid. For the longest time, queer Muslims have been made to feel that our fears, pains, needs, and desires are not valid because before the existence of social media, we largely lived in isolation from others who shared them. But the popularity of Instagram, Tumblr, and hashtags has enabled us to find our communities and create our tribes, connecting with and empowering one another. Representation presented another challenge. Historically, photography has been prohibited within Islam. Prophet Muhammad has been noted as saying, "The most severely punished people on the day of resurrection will be those who make images." Not surprisingly, given that very explicit message, it's almost impossible to find photographic evidence of the existence of queer Muslims. As I researched historical images of queer movements and icons in libraries and on social media, I was unable to find a single person who identified as Muslim. But lack of representation, of course, doesn't mean that they haven't existed alongside other queer activists in the 20th century.
Thank you. Yeah. I think that's so beautifully encapsulated. Oh, we can hang on. We'll just go back and forth. The contribution that your work makes, right? It's this exploration of thinking about queerness, and that's and you accurately pointed out it's not that it's not been talked about, but I think there's something to be said about who's actually done the talking, who's actually created the stories and the narratives about us, on a larger scale. I wonder. I know that you talk about the photo project very briefly in the latter bit of the book, but what's been the sort of reaction from producing the text itself as you share your life experiences? What's been the reader reception? Who did you write this book for?
I had a bunch of Post-it notes in front of me as I was writing the book because I really wanted to understand who I was talking to. It was really important for me, and it sort of shaped what I shared and the language I used. And a lot of the people who were on that wall on the Post-it notes were people I photographed, young kids around the world who I photographed. There were people in my life, people who might be surprised to learn things about them, the things I never shared. So I feel like it was mostly for you know, people who I thought might be comforted by someone being so honest and transparent about their journey and their experiences as a queer Muslim. Yeah, and I just wanted it to resonate with those people.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We were talking a little bit about perhaps a passage that you would read regarding your relationship with your mom, but before I have you do that, I wonder if we can sit and think about, and maybe if you have something to share about thinking about the dynamics of family as it evolves through displacement, right? Like you so beautifully and in a heartbreakingly way talk about the sort of shifting performance of your father and your mother and how the dynamics between the three of you like change at certain interjections. I'm trying not to give away all the details. It's so tricky. I want you to buy the book. But I would love if you could like expand on like thinking about the evolution of love, right? Like the evolution of love and finding the compassion to love, knowing that the roots of why things played out the way that it did and why they behaved the way that they did will inevitably be irreconcilable to a certain extent.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want me to read the passage?
Yes.
Or did you want me to?
Yeah.
Okay.
I will let you.
Sorry.
No. It was page 214.
Sorry?
It was page 214, I think.
214.
Yes.
Okay, cool. I left my book on the flight. Sorry about that.
Someone will be gifted a book on their next flight.
214 you said?
Yes.
And it's what we talked about, right? Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
So this passage that I'm about to read, it starts with a conversation between me and my brother. Recently, Bilal asked me, "Why do you need to call yourself Muslim?" Maybe it's our age difference, but we've never really discussed his relationship with Islam at any great length. I thought about this question. Why do I feel loyalty toward Islam when, as Bilal sees it, Islam isn't always kind toward Muslims like me? The reality is that this identity has shaped the way I see the world and the way others see me, in a way that is beyond my control. Being Muslim is one of the only absolutes about myself I can be sure of. It serves as an anchor when I'm lost at sea. It helps me come back to myself, and it leads me to others who struggle to reconcile seemingly disparate parts of themselves. For me, it's not something I can put on and take off like a garment. There's no denying that my identity as a queer Muslim is the lens through which I see and engage with so many aspects of my daily life. Fashion, music, literature, social media, politics, history, activism, sexuality, gender, faith, art. Basically, everything. Not everyone is equipped for activism in the traditional sense. Marching, writing letters to officials, but dedicating your life to understanding yourself can be its own form of protest, especially when the world tells you that you don't exist. Throughout my childhood, I faced the very real fear that revealing my identity would put me in danger. Once I started figuring out the many factors that define me, I was able to offer insight from the point of view I had searched for my entire life. I began to look outside myself. I understood my place in the world, and now I wanted to help others do the same. Maybe this identity, this label I wear that defines me, is my house, and my voice was in here all along. My siblings have the keys, and my parents are finally regular visitors here. Maybe the roof opens on a hinge to show that there are no rigid limits, no boundary between this house and the sky, the rest of the world. What luck to have this house with a solid foundation, this home that supports me as I refine my perspective over and over and over again. Dear Samra, being a 7-year-old is hard work. No matter what grown-ups think, it's stressful. Especially for you, someone who likes to know the whys, the whens, the wheres, the hows, and the whos. There's just no certainty these days. Other 7-year-olds might feel fine busying themselves with playing, teasing, and running around, but that's not the life for you. You always want to know the meaning behind everything. My serious beti is how your mother introduces you to guests. That will never change. You'll always be quiet and serious, and that's okay. Don't beat yourself over it. It doesn't mean that you won't also experience an immense amount of joy in your life. Breathe. There will be so much joy. Being quiet doesn't mean you don't have anything to say. It's okay to take time to think about how certain things make you feel and to not know right away. You have permission. You'll find times when it will be right for you to say something, and you will. Seeking answers is one of the biggest gifts you've been given, but also know that there's so much fun in not knowing and being delighted by what you might learn. The joy of discovery is one of the biggest pleasures you'll ever know. It will warm your heart and make you so thrilled to be alive. Breathe. You'll get to know many things, how it feels to inspire people and to discover kindness in unexpected places, how the sunrise looks on opposite sides of the world, and how smart and brilliant your siblings are. But most important, yourself. You'll be okay because your curiosity will lead you to where you need to be. Always listen to that voice in your head and to the people who you suspect are smart and can teach you things. Smart people will save you. Love them, get to know them, and ask them what they think. Breathe. Like you, your parents will change many times. Be kind and forgiving when they do. Although there will be many times in life when you'll feel like you've landed somewhere you're not supposed to be, know that your curiosity and desire for knowledge will pull you back to safety. You'll be okay. Know that. Love, Samra.